Shut up, you charity case!
He slapped me so hard the sound echoed through the store. Then he grabbed my arm and dragged me out like I was nothing. The crowd laughed, the cameras flashed, but what they didn't know was that the woman they just humiliated was the wife of the man who owned everything. They say wealth changes people. Maybe that's true for some, but not for me. I never cared much for glitter or attention. Even after marrying Benjamin, one of the most influential businessmen in the country, I still preferred simple mornings. Coffee by the window, my old sweater, and a quiet walk through town where no one knew my name. I loved that anonymity. It reminded me of who I was before the mansions, before the headlines, before the title of Mrs. Sterling, the billionaire's wife. Benjamin used to tease me about it. "You could have anything, Ava," he'd say, smiling over his coffee. "Why do you keep living like you still need to save every penny?" I'd shrug and tell him the truth, because money can't buy respect, and the moment people know you're rich, their kindness becomes currency. I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I was nobody. For years, I stayed behind the scenes of Benjamin's empire. He owned one of the largest retail chains in the country, a name people whispered like it was royalty. I had been part of its early days, before the luxury stores and glossy advertisements. I used to help him design customer programs, always telling him, "Treat every person like they matter." Somewhere along the way, I wondered if that message had been forgotten. So one ordinary Tuesday, I decided to see for myself. No chauffeur, no designer bag, just my old beige coat and a pair of flats I'd had for years. I tied my hair in a loose bun, left my diamond ring at home, and took the subway downtown. No one glanced twice at me, and I liked it that way. For the first time in a while, I felt free, unnoticed, unguarded, just another woman in the crowd. When I stepped off the train, I could already see one of our flagship stores gleaming across the street. It looked magnificent, all glass and gold, with staff lined up like models behind the counter. I watched from outside for a moment, people walking in and out, some smiling, some frowning, but most just invisible to the staff. I took a slow breath and whispered to myself, "Let's see what kindness looks like today." As I entered, the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. A few customers turned to look at me, their eyes scanning my coat, my shoes, my hair. Their expressions said what their mouths didn't. "She doesn't belong here." I smiled politely and ignored the whispers. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to see everything. I moved toward the counter and waited patiently while others were helped before me, even though I'd been there longer. No one asked if I needed help. No one smiled. I could almost feel the invisible wall between those who had money and those who looked like they didn't. I stood there quietly, clutching my small purse, unaware that this simple visit, this quiet act of curiosity, was about to turn into the loudest lesson of my life. The store was one of those places that practically breathed luxury. Every corner sparkled, every shelf glistened with imported products, and every employee stood with a rehearsed smile until they saw someone like me. The moment I stepped up to the front counter, the atmosphere shifted. The girl behind the register gave me a quick glance, her expression flickering between boredom and suspicion, before turning her attention to the woman standing beside me, dripping in designer jewelry. I waited quietly, hoping she'd notice that I was next, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned closer to the wealthy customer and whispered something that made them both laugh softly. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment but from the sharp reminder of how easily people judge worth by appearance. I tightened my grip on the small card in my hand, the one I planned to use to buy a gift for one of the store's charity partners, and reminded myself to stay calm. Just then, a tall man in a tailored gray suit entered. His cologne arrived before he did, heavy and expensive. He carried himself like the world owed him its time. His name, I later learned, was Preston. He scanned the store as though searching for someone to belittle, and unfortunately, his gaze landed right on me. "What's someone like you doing here?" he asked loudly, his tone drenched in arrogance. The laughter that followed came not just from him, but from the few people nearby who wanted to stay on his good side. I could feel their eyes crawling over me, judging my simple coat, my scuffed shoes, my plain hair. I took a breath and replied softly, "Just here to buy something." Preston scoffed. "Buy something? From here? Do you even know what a single item costs?" I stayed silent, hoping he'd grow bored and leave. But bullies rarely stop when their audience is watching. He moved closer, invading my space. "People like you should learn your place. This store isn't for—" He paused, looking me up and down. "Charity cases." The manager appeared then, a man I recognized from the company's early days, though he didn't recognize me. I almost smiled at the irony. He asked what was happening, and Preston gestured toward me like I was a stain on the floor. "She's holding up the line," he said. "Can't you see she doesn't belong here?" The manager's face hardened, not with empathy, but agreement. "Ma'am, if you're not here to make a serious purchase, I'll have to ask you to step aside." My heart sank, not because of the words, but because I'd helped write the company's original motto years ago: "Every customer matters." I wanted to remind them of that, but instead I just smiled faintly and said, "That's fine. I can wait." Their laughter returned. Cameras began to lift from pockets. Someone whispered, "She's crazy to argue with Preston." But I didn't argue. I simply stood there, calm as ever, unaware that their cruelty was already being recorded and that the world was about to watch the mask of false superiority crumble in the most unforgettable way. The air in the store felt heavier now, as if every breath I took drew in their contempt. I could hear the soft chime of glass bracelets and the quiet hum of whispers, people who pretended not to watch but couldn't look away. Preston leaned against the counter, smirking, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You must be lost, sweetheart. The thrift store is 3 blocks down." I looked at him, calm but firm. "I'm exactly where I need to be." My words only seemed to amuse him. "Oh, she talks back," he sneered, glancing at the manager. "Do you let just anyone stroll in here now?" The manager chuckled awkwardly, clearly unwilling to defend me. It was strange, the way people laughed when they didn't have the courage to speak up. I'd seen that look before, fear hiding behind false smiles, but I refused to shrink. "You don't need to humiliate people to feel important," I said quietly. That sentence seemed to strike him like a spark to gasoline. His expression darkened, his ego bruised in front of his audience. "What did you just say to me?" he barked, stepping closer. Before I could even respond, his hand shot out. The slap landed hard across my face. The sound echoed through the store like a gunshot. My vision blurred for a moment, my cheek stinging from the force. Gasps filled the room, followed by a sharp, uncomfortable silence. But Preston wasn't done. He grabbed my arm, his grip rough and unrelenting. "I told you to shut up!" he shouted, his face twisting with anger. Then, in one shocking motion, he dragged me across the floor toward the entrance. My purse fell, scattering the few things I had onto the polished marble tiles. My arm burned where his fingers dug in. "Get your hands off me," I said firmly, trying to pull free. But he shoved me forward, the force sending me stumbling through the open door and into the street. My knees hit the pavement hard. The cold air rushed into my lungs, but I refused to cry. I refused to let him see me break. Inside, people were frozen in place. Some covered their mouths, others raised their phones to record. I could hear one woman whisper, "Is she okay?" Another muttered, "She deserved it for talking back." I pushed myself up slowly, brushing the dust off my coat. My face burned, but not from pain. From the sheer disbelief that this kind of cruelty still existed, even in the gleam of a luxury store. Preston turned to the crowd and said with mocking pride, "That's how you deal with people who don't belong." He didn't realize that his arrogance, his violence, and his words had already been caught on 6 cameras. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I simply looked at him one last time and said softly, "You'll regret this." Then I walked away, head high, back straight, my dignity intact, while behind me, laughter filled the air like poison. What I didn't know was that within hours, that same laughter would turn into silence, and his name would become a lesson the whole world would remember. When I reached home that evening, the sky outside was gray and heavy, as though it carried the same weight that pressed against my chest. I walked through the front door quietly, my reflection catching in the grand hallway mirror. My hair was a mess, my cheeks still flushed from the slap, and my coat bore the faint marks of the floor where he'd dragged me. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at myself. The woman in the mirror didn't look weak. She looked still, silent, controlled, but I could feel the storm building inside me. Benjamin was in his study when I entered, typing away at his computer. He looked up the second he saw me. His expression shifted from surprise to alarm. "Ava? What happened to your face?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come. I just handed him my phone and pressed play on the video that was already circling online. I didn't have to say anything. The footage said it all. The slap, the dragging, the laughter, the cameras flashing. The internet had done its work. Thousands of comments, millions of views, and one brutal truth spreading faster than anyone could stop it. Benjamin watched the video silently, his jaw tightening with every passing second. When it ended, he set the phone down with such care that it was almost frightening. Then he looked at me, his eyes cold and sharp, the warmth gone. "That was one of our stores," he said quietly. "My store." I nodded. "Your employees?" "Your brand." He exhaled slowly, his knuckles whitening against the edge of the desk. "Who was he?" "A man named Preston," I said softly. "He works with your regional management. The store manager didn't stop him either." Benjamin stood, his face unreadable. "No shouting?" he asked, almost to himself. "No defense?" "Not one person?" "None," I whispered. He turned away, staring out the window into the fading daylight. "You told me once that power isn't about control. It's about responsibility," he murmured. "Looks like I forgot that lesson." Then, with a deep breath, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. His voice was calm, steady, but there was steel beneath it. "Get me every regional manager on the line. We're holding an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp, no excuses." He ended the call and looked back at me. "You don't have to do anything," he said gently. "You've already done enough." That night, I lay awake in bed while the storm outside finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rolled through the city, and I realized something. Silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. The kind that comes before change. The kind that builds quietly until it's impossible to ignore. I didn't need to shout for justice. The world was already watching, and by morning the same empire that once looked down on me would learn what happens when a woman's dignity becomes the storm they never saw coming. By morning, the entire city had seen the video. News outlets replayed it endlessly, and hashtags bearing my name and his company trended across every platform. Benjamin barely said a word during breakfast. He didn't need to. His silence carried more weight than any outburst could. I could tell he had already made up his mind about what would happen next. When his assistant arrived to pick us up, she seemed nervous, as if walking into a storm she couldn't predict. The car ride was quiet, too quiet. I watched the city blur past the window while my mind replayed the previous day in flashes. The laughter, the slap, the sting of humiliation. Only this time I didn't feel powerless. I felt composed, ready. When we pulled up in front of the flagship store, there were already reporters gathered outside, microphones pointed toward the glass doors, waiting for answers. The employees inside whispered among themselves, their faces pale with anxiety. They didn't expect the CEO himself to show up, and certainly not with the woman from the video walking beside him. Benjamin opened the door for me, his expression firm. "Ready?" he asked. I smiled faintly. More than ever. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the silent store. Every gaze turned toward us. Managers, clerks, even the same customers who had once laughed now stood frozen. And there he was, Preston, standing near the counter, pretending to inspect a display, but his face betrayed him. Fear flickered through his arrogant smile as recognition dawned. His voice trembled slightly as he stammered, You're the woman from yesterday." Benjamin stepped forward, his tone cool and precise. "She's not just the woman from yesterday," he said. "She's my wife." The words rippled through the room like a shockwave. No one moved. No one breathed. Preston blinked rapidly, his confidence collapsing. "Sir, I didn't know." Benjamin's gaze hardened. "That's the point. You didn't care to know. You treated her like she was beneath you because she looked ordinary. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of people are running my stores." He turned to the manager, the same man who had laughed with Preston the day before. "You stood by and watched it happen. Consider this your last day in my company." The man's face drained of color. Preston tried to interject. "Sir, please. I was just defending—" "Defending what?" Benjamin's voice cut through the air like thunder. "Your ego? Your ignorance? You didn't defend her. You assaulted her." Security arrived quietly, as if summoned by Benjamin's tone alone. "Escort him out," Benjamin ordered, "and make sure every regional director knows anyone who treats a customer with disrespect will never work for me again." As Preston was led out, the employees stood in silence. The same people who had once looked at me like I didn't belong now looked down in shame. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply met their eyes and said, "Next time, before you judge someone by their clothes, remember this moment." Benjamin reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. The cameras outside flashed through the glass, capturing the exact moment the tables turned. For the first time since that awful day, I felt a calm warmth spread through me, not from revenge, but from justice served without a single shout, because true power doesn't need to scream, it just arrives, quietly, decisively, and unforgettable. The store felt different that morning, like the air itself had shifted. The whispers were gone, replaced by something quieter, something heavier, awareness. The staff stood straighter now, their rehearsed smiles replaced with genuine humility. Benjamin's words still hung in the air, echoing in every corner of the room. But what mattered most to me wasn't his authority. It was the silence that followed, the kind that happens when people finally understand the weight of what they've done. I turned to face them, not as a CEO's wife or a victim, but as a woman who had seen both sides of humanity, the arrogance of wealth and the quiet strength of dignity. My voice was steady when I spoke. "You judged me because I looked ordinary. You mocked me because I didn't fit your idea of what belongs here. But let me tell you something." I paused, scanning each face. "You never know who you're speaking to or what battle they've already fought just to stand where they are." No one moved. No one dared to look away. Benjamin stepped back, letting me take the floor. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about what this moment represented, for every person who'd ever been humiliated for not looking rich enough, for not being important enough. I could feel my voice grow firmer as I said, "Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty always costs everything." Some of you laughed at me yesterday, and some of you stayed silent. Both hurt equally, but today you get to decide what kind of people you'll be moving forward. A few of the employees lowered their heads. The young woman at the register, the one who had ignored me, was quietly crying. I didn't hate her. In some strange way, I pitied her. She was just another product of a world that confuses money with worth. Benjamin turned to the crowd. "My wife built the foundation of this company with me. The policies, the training, the motto. Every customer matters. Somewhere along the way, that message got lost. It won't happen again." His voice softened as he looked at me. "From today onward, she'll lead our new initiative, the Humanity Program. Every employee, from manager to trainee, will learn the value of empathy and respect." Applause slowly filled the room. It wasn't forced this time. It was real. I felt something loosen inside me, a long-held ache finally letting go. Later that evening, as the sun set, I sat on the balcony of our home, watching the light spill across the skyline. The city buzzed below, still alive with the story that had taken the internet by storm. My name was trending, but I didn't care about fame or validation. What mattered was that the lesson had reached where it needed to. Benjamin joined me quietly, handing me a cup of tea. "You changed everything today," he said softly. I smiled faintly. "No," I whispered, looking out at the fading sky. "They changed themselves." I just reminded them how that moment wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Not for me, but for a world that had forgotten the simple truth that respect isn't a luxury, it's a choice. And sometimes, the quietest act of dignity can echo louder than any slap ever could. That day, I learned the loudest revenge isn't shouting back, it's rising quietly, with grace. If someone ever humiliates you, remember, silence has power, and dignity never bows.